For my granddaughter's 8th birthday, my sons-in-laws gave her a teddy bear. It was soft, oversized, the kind with honey-brown fur and a stitched smile that looked permanently surprised. She hugged it to her chest and laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. For a second, I let myself relax. 8 years old. Cake crumbs on the table. Streamers sagging from the porch rail. The ordinary magic of a family gathering. Then she froze. "Grandpa," she whispered, not looking at me, eyes fixed on the bear. "Why does his tummy feel hard?" I leaned in closer. And I went pale. I didn't shout. I didn't grab the bear and tear it open. I didn't accuse anyone. I smiled, the way you do when you're buying time, and said, "Let Grandpa take a look, sweetheart. You go show your cousins your new bracelet." She hesitated, then handed it to me. The moment it touched my hands, I knew. Beneath the plush, just behind the seam, was a rigid plate, too flat, too precise to be stuffing. I carried the bear into my study, closed the door, and locked it. 3 days later, the police knocked on my sons-in-law's door. But it all started with a teddy bear. The party was in my backyard, same as every year since my wife passed. I kept the tradition because traditions keep you anchored. Balloons tied to the fence. Lemonade sweating in pitchers. My granddaughter Lily wearing a paper crown that slid over one eye every time she laughed. She loved animals, loved soft things, loved anything that felt safe. My son Aaron stood near the grill, flipping burgers like he was following a script he hadn't memorized. He's 39, tall, quiet, and good at being agreeable. Too good. His wife, Melissa, moved through the crowd with practiced warmth, offering napkins, remembering names, smiling like nothing could ever trouble her. Her parents, Harold and Denise, arrived late with the bear. Denise held it like a trophy. "We found this at a boutique," she said, voice sugary. "Handmade. Special." Harold nodded. The owner said it was popular with kids. Lily's eyes lit up. She took the bear and hugged it hard, burying her face in its fur. That's when she froze. I noticed because I've spent a lifetime noticing pauses. 40 years teaching history will do that. The places where stories stutter are where the truth hides. I leaned down, felt the firmness beneath the fur, and felt my stomach drop. I kept my voice steady. "Looks like he's got a little backpack inside," I said lightly. "Let me check the tag." Denise's smile twitched. Melissa watched me, eyes sharp for half a second before smoothing over. Aaron didn't notice anything at all. In my study, with the door locked, I laid the bear on the desk under the lamp. I ran my fingers along the seam, found where the stitching was slightly newer than the rest. With a letter opener, I carefully opened it. Inside was a plastic housing, no bigger than a deck of cards, secured with foam. A small lens sat behind a pinhole stitched into the bear's belly button. A microphone. A blinking green light. And tucked beneath it all, a coin-sized tracker. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. For weeks, I'd felt watched. Doors left slightly ajar. My phone battery draining faster than usual. Lily asking questions that didn't sound like her. "Grandpa, do you forget things a lot? Grandpa, do you take your medicine every day?" I'd brushed it off as kids being curious. I photographed everything. The device. The serial numbers. The stitching. The tracker. Evidence has weight when it's documented. I replaced the stuffing, stitched the seam closed as best I could, and brought the bear back outside. "Loose stitching," I said, handing it to Lily. "Nothing to worry about." She hugged it again, smiled, ran off. Denise exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. That night, after everyone left and Lily was asleep in the guest room, I sat in my study with the bear and my laptop. I didn't connect it to my network. I didn't power it up. I simply logged the make and model numbers I could see through the housing and searched. It wasn't a toy. It was a commercially available nanny cam system disguised as a plush animal, marketed for remote caregiving and behavioral monitoring. The tracker was a separate device, often used to track luggage or pets. Together, they formed a complete picture of a child's movements and conversations. My chest tightened as memory stacked on memory. 3 weeks earlier, I'd overheard Melissa on the phone in the kitchen. "He's fine most days," she'd said softly. "But he gets confused sometimes. We're just worried." Worried. I'd started recording after that. Old habit. When something doesn't add up, you collect data. I'd caught snippets, Melissa telling Lily to practice what to say if someone asked about Grandpa. Harold asking pointed questions about my finances. Denise offering to help manage my appointments. I told myself I was being paranoid. The bear proved I wasn't. The next morning, I called an elder law attorney I'd found after midnight searches and too much coffee. Her name was Rebecca Hale. She met me in her office on a Sunday, which told me everything I needed to know. She didn't touch the bear. She leaned in, adjusted her glasses, and said, "How long have you suspected?" "Longer than I wanted to admit," I said. She listened to the recordings. Studied the photos. Pulled up court records. "There's a guardianship petition filed in your name," she said quietly. 10 days ago. My hands went numb. By who? Your daughter-in-law. With her parents as co-petitioners. The words landed like stones. The papers were already there: allegations of cognitive decline, concerns about child safety, a proposed placement in a memory care facility. My signature forged in neat, practiced loops. Why? I asked, though I already knew. Rebecca slid a financial summary across the desk. My house. My savings. My pension. My investments. The numbers added up to something worth taking. "They'll escalate," she said. "They always do. They'll try to create an incident. Something that makes you look unstable." As if on cue, my phone rang. Melissa's name lit up the screen. "Hi, Dad," she said brightly. "Lily's been asking for a special birthday outing. Just the two of us. I'll pick her up at 2 and drop her back by 5. Every instinct screamed no. But refusing would make me look exactly like the picture they were painting. "Okay," I said. "Have fun." After we hung up, I bought Lily a pink GPS watch with an SOS button. I showed her how it worked like it was a game. She grinned and promised to wear it. At 2 o'clock, Melissa arrived. Lily hugged me, bear tucked under one arm. "See you later, Grandpa," she said. "Always," I replied. At 3:15, Melissa texted an address. Somewhere on the edge of town. I looked it up. Vacant storefronts. Industrial park. No ice cream shop. No arcade. At 4, I drove there. The lot was empty. I called Melissa. Voicemail. At 4:27, my phone buzzed. SOS. The alert showed Lily at Denise's house, 20 minutes away. I called 911. "I believe my granddaughter is in danger," I said. I was given a false location. Police met me at the address. Denise answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's a misunderstanding," she said. "We're just talking." Lily appeared behind her, saw me, and ran. She wrapped her arms around my waist and sobbed. "They said you forgot me," she cried. "They said you weren't coming." I held her and felt something inside me settle into iron. The officer took statements. No arrests. Not yet. That night, I synced Lily's watch to my computer. It had recorded audio. I listened. Melissa's voice. Calm. Controlled. Say it again. Grandpa forgets to make you meals. Denise's voice. Sweet. If you don't help us, something bad could happen. Lily's voice. Small. Broken. I sat in the dark and listened until there was nothing left to hear. Aaron came over that night. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. I knew about the petition, he said. I didn't know about the bear. I handed him the headphones. He listened. He cried. I have texts, he said finally. Between Melissa and my dad. About the house. About timelines. We worked with Rebecca. We built the case piece by piece. Surveillance. Coercion. Forgery. Child manipulation. The hearing lasted hours. Melissa cried. Denise clutched tissues. Harold stared at the floor. Rebecca played the audio. The room went quiet. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Petition denied. Charges referred. Restraining orders issued. 3 weeks later, the police knocked on Harold and Denise's door. Melissa lost custody. Supervised visits only. She used one. Aaron moved out. Filed for divorce. Lily stayed with me while the dust settled. Therapy helped. Time helped more. One afternoon, we sat on the porch swing. She held a new teddy bear. This one I'd picked myself. No seams out of place. No weight where it didn't belong. Grandpa, she asked, did I do something wrong? I shook my head. No, sweetheart. You did everything right. She leaned against me. The bear fell to the floor, forgotten. Sometimes danger doesn't look like danger. Sometimes it looks like a gift with a ribbon on it. Sometimes it feels soft and harmless until you look closer. If you're watching this and you love a child, pay attention to the pauses. The questions that don't sound right. The gifts that feel wrong in your hands. And if you're a grandparent, or a parent, or anyone who's ever been told they're just worried about, trust your gut. I didn't go too far. I went exactly far enough. What do you think? I think about that day more often than I admit. Not because of the courtroom. Not because of the police lights or the paperwork or the quiet humiliation on Melissa's face when the judge read her ruling. I think about the moment Lily froze with that teddy bear in her arms. The exact second when her body knew something her mind couldn't explain yet. Children sense danger long before adults give it language. After the hearing, life didn't snap back into place the way people imagine justice does. There was no clean ending, no sudden peace. There was paperwork, therapy appointments, long evenings where Lily would wake up crying from dreams she couldn't quite describe. There were moments when she'd ask if she was bad for telling the truth. Moments when she'd whisper, they said Grandpa would be mad. That was the hardest part. Not the betrayal. Not the money. Not even the fear. It was undoing the lie that protecting someone means hurting yourself. Rebecca warned me this would happen. They don't just manipulate courts, she said. They manipulate memories. It takes time to untangle that. So I stayed patient. Every morning, I made Lily breakfast. Pancakes shaped like animals. Oatmeal with too much honey. Every night, I tucked her in myself. Same routine. Same words. Safety is built through repetition. Aaron tried, too. He came over after work, quieter than before, like a man learning how to take up space again without permission. Sometimes Lily hugged him. Sometimes she didn't. He never pushed. I failed you, he told me one night as we sat at the kitchen table long after Lily fell asleep. I shook my head. You stopped failing when you stood up. He stared at his hands. I should have done it sooner. Most people do, I said. That's why this works as often as it does. A month later, Child Protective Services finalized their report. The language was clinical, careful. Coercive coaching. Psychological distress. Pattern of manipulation. Words that never fully capture the sound of a child crying because adults told her love had conditions. Melissa contested the custody ruling once. Just once. Her lawyer withdrew halfway through the process. The evidence was too clean. The recordings too clear. The bear itself sat in an evidence locker, its soft fur now nothing more than packaging for intent. Denise sent a letter. No apology. Just a page of excuses. We were worried. We acted out of love. You misunderstood. I didn't respond. Silence is powerful when it's no longer used against you. One afternoon, months later, Lily brought the bear up again. The original one. Is he gone forever? She asked. Yes, I said. She thought about that, then nodded. That's okay. She picked up her new bear, the safe one, the ordinary one, and dragged it across the living room by one arm. The world, slowly, was becoming ordinary again. And that was the real victory. People sometimes ask me if I regret taking it as far as I did. If I wish I'd handled it quietly. Privately. Inside the family. I think they ask because they're imagining themselves in my place, and they're afraid of what standing up would cost them. Here's the truth I learned too late but won't forget again: predators rely on your desire for peace. They count on your discomfort with conflict. They hide behind manners, titles, family roles, and gifts wrapped in pretty paper. They don't stop because you're kind. They stop because you're prepared. That teddy bear sits in my mind as a reminder. Not of fear, but of clarity. Of the moment I chose to stop second-guessing myself and start acting like the protector Lily already believed I was. If someone you love ever freezes over something that's supposed to be harmless, don't rush past it. Don't laugh it off. Don't tell yourself you're overreacting. Pause. Look closer. Ask why. Sometimes the smallest thing in a child's hands is the biggest warning you'll ever get. And if you're wondering whether it's worth the fallout to protect someone who can't protect themselves yet, let me answer that for you. It always is. Every single time, years passed faster than I expected them to. They always do when you're no longer counting time by calendars, but by growth marks on a doorframe and school photos taped to the refrigerator. Lily grew taller, steadier, more confident. The nightmares faded. The questions stopped circling back on themselves. Trust, once broken, didn't rush to return, but it did come back, quietly, like a cat testing whether a room is safe again. She stopped asking if I was mad. She started asking if she could help. On Saturday mornings, she'd sit at the kitchen table while I graded papers for the adjunct course I still taught, even though I didn't need the money. She'd color while I worked. Same room. Same rhythm. That was important. Presence without pressure. One afternoon, she looked up from her coloring book and said, "Grandpa, I know they lied now." I set my pen down. "What made you think of that?" She shrugged. "My therapist says sometimes people lie because they want something, not because you did anything wrong." Smart kid. Always had been. What did they want? I asked. She thought about it for a long time. They wanted you gone. I nodded. Yes. So they could take your house, she asked, matter of fact. Yes. She frowned. That's a stupid reason. I laughed, surprised by the sound of it. I agree. That was the moment I knew she was going to be okay. Aaron found his footing, too. Therapy helped him understand the kind of fear that keeps good people quiet. He learned how guilt can be weaponized just as easily as love. Some lessons come late, but late doesn't mean useless. Melissa faded from our lives the way some people do when consequences finally catch up with them. Supervised visits turned into missed visits. Missed visits turned into silence. Lily asked about her at first, then less often, then not at all. Children don't cling to people who make them feel unsafe once they're given permission to let go. I never badmouthed her. I didn't have to. Truth has a way of standing on its own when you stop propping up lies. Every now and then, someone new would hear the story and say the same thing. I don't know how you stayed so calm. I would have exploded. I would have confronted them immediately. Maybe. But anger would have been the ending they wanted. What they didn't expect was patience. Documentation. Quiet resolve. They mistook age for weakness and kindness for confusion. That mistake cost them everything they were trying to steal. The teddy bear itself was eventually destroyed as part of the case. The police asked if I wanted it back once the charges were finalized. I told them no. Some things aren't souvenirs. Some things are lessons best left behind. But I kept the photos. Not to relive the fear, but to remind myself how easy it is for danger to wear a friendly face. On Lily's 10th birthday, she had another party in the same backyard. Balloons again. Cake again. Laughter spilling over the fence again. She opened her gifts one by one, thanking each person carefully, like someone who understands gratitude isn't automatic. Someone gave her a stuffed dog. She squeezed it, laughed, and moved on. No freezing. No questions. No warning bells. That was the real proof of healing. Later that night, as I tucked her in, she wrapped her arms around my neck and said, "Grandpa?" "Yes, sweetheart? You always come, right?" I kissed her forehead. Always. And I meant it in every sense of the word. If there's one thing I hope stays with whoever hears this story, it's this: evil doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't kick down doors or raise its voice. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it hands a child a toy and calls it love. Pay attention to the quiet moments. The pauses. The questions that don't sound like curiosity. That's where the truth usually is. And if you ever find yourself standing at that crossroads, between keeping the peace and protecting the innocent, don't hesitate. Choose protection. Peace can come later. I used to believe the hardest part of growing old was letting go. Letting go of strength. Of authority. Of the assumption that the people closest to you would always act in your best interest. I was wrong. The hardest part isn't letting go at all. It's realizing how many people are waiting for you to become invisible. After everything settled, after the court dates and therapy sessions and careful rebuilding, I started noticing how often stories like mine surfaced in small, quiet ways. A neighbor whose aunt was suddenly too confused to live alone. A colleague whose father had been rushed into a facility after one bad day. A friend who whispered, "They say it's for his own good," but couldn't explain why his house was already listed for sale. I didn't interrupt. I didn't preach. I just listened. Because that's how these things spread, not through shouting, but through silence. Through families telling themselves it's easier not to question. Through good people assuming the system will catch what they miss. It doesn't always. One evening, months later, Lily found an old photo album on the shelf. Pictures of her grandmother, my wife, holding her as a baby. She traced the image with her finger and asked, would Grandma have been mad about what happened? I swallowed. No, I said. She would have been proud. How do you know? Because she taught me something important, I said. That love doesn't mean staying quiet when something is wrong. Lily nodded like that made perfect sense. To her, it did. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat alone on the porch and thought about how close I'd come to losing her. Not physically, but emotionally. To a story someone else was trying to write about me. About us. That teddy bear was never really about watching Lily. It was about erasing me. About turning a living, thinking person into a problem that needed to be managed. About turning a grandfather into an obstacle. About rewriting reality slowly enough that no one would notice until it was too late. If I'd ignored that moment. If I'd laughed it off. If I'd told myself I was being dramatic. I wouldn't be telling this story. Someone else would be explaining why I declined so quickly. So when people ask me now what the warning signs are, I don't give them a checklist. I tell them this. Pay attention when concern comes with control. Pay attention when help comes with paperwork already filled out. Pay attention when a child is asked to carry an adult's lie. And above all, pay attention when something meant to bring comfort makes you uneasy. That feeling isn't paranoia. It's instinct. Lily is 12 now. Strong. Curious. Unafraid to ask hard questions. She knows she's safe, not because the world is harmless, but because someone will always stand between her and harm. That's what saved us. Not luck. Not timing. Not the law. A decision. So if you're listening to this and wondering whether you'd have the courage to do the same, let me tell you something you may not hear often enough. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be young to be dangerous to predators. And you don't need permission to protect what matters. Sometimes, all it takes is noticing when a child freezes and choosing not to look away. I noticed. And because I did, my granddaughter still sleeps down the hall, safe, unafraid, and certain of one thing. Grandpa always comes. There's one last part of this story I don't tell very often. Not because it's dramatic. Not because it's painful. But because it's quiet, and quiet truths don't always go viral. About a year after everything ended, Lily came home from school with a worksheet folded carefully in her backpack. It was an assignment called "Who Keeps Me Safe?" Most kids wrote parents. Some wrote teachers. A few wrote police officers or firefighters. Lily handed it to me at the kitchen table while I was peeling apples. "Can you read it?" she asked. I wiped my hands and unfolded the paper. There were 3 names written in her careful handwriting. Grandpa. Dad. Me. I looked up at her. "You keep yourself safe?" She nodded. "My therapist says knowing when something feels wrong is part of being safe." I swallowed hard. She's right. Then Lily pointed to the teddy bear she'd drawn in the corner of the page. "Not the old one. The safe one." "I know now," she said, "that if something feels wrong, it probably is. Even if everyone else says it's fine." That's when I understood what we'd really won. Not the case. Not the money. Not the house. We'd broken the pattern. Predators depend on repetition. On silence passed down like an inheritance. On children learning that adults always know better, even when they're afraid. Lily learned something different. She learned that fear isn't weakness. It's information. Years from now, she won't remember court dates or legal language or the sound of a judge's gavel. But she will remember that moment when her body warned her and that someone listened. And maybe someday, if she's holding her own child, and that child freezes for no obvious reason, she won't dismiss it. She won't say, "You're fine." She'll pause. She'll look closer. That's how cycles end. Not with revenge. Not with shouting. But with awareness passed quietly from one generation to the next. I keep one thing from all of this on my desk. Not the bear. Not the documents. Not the recordings. Just that worksheet. Because every time someone tells me, "That could never happen in my family," I think of how ordinary that birthday party was. The balloons. The cake. The smiling faces. The gift wrapped perfectly. Danger rarely looks like danger at first. Sometimes it looks like love. So if you take nothing else from this story, take this. When a child's instincts speak, believe them. When your own instincts whisper, don't silence them. And when protecting someone costs you comfort, choose protection anyway. I did. And because of that, my granddaughter didn't just grow up safe. She grew up aware. And that may be the greatest gift I'll ever give her. There's a moment that comes, quietly, after everything is over, when the adrenaline finally drains away and you're left alone with what almost happened. It doesn't arrive with fear anymore. It arrives with clarity. Sometimes I'll be making coffee early in the morning, the house still dark, Lily asleep down the hall, and I'll catch myself imagining the other version of this story. The one where I laughed off the teddy bear. The one where I didn't check the seam. The one where I told myself I didn't want to cause trouble. In that version, there is no courtroom. No recordings. No second chances. There is a phone call instead. A social worker's tone carefully neutral. A decision already made. I don't let myself linger there long. But I don't pretend it doesn't exist either. Remembering what could have been is how I make sure it never is. Lily is older now. Taller than she should be for her age. She borrows my hoodies and leaves them draped over chairs like she owns the place. Sometimes she rolls her eyes when I remind her to text me when she arrives somewhere. Sometimes she sighs and says, "I know, Grandpa." But she always texts. That's how I know she understands the difference between control and care. One evening, not long ago, she came home from a sleepover and told me one of her friends had been scared at another kid's house. She said something felt weird, Lily told me. But the parents kept saying it was fine. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her she doesn't have to stay anywhere she feels scared, Lily said. And that she can call someone she trusts. I nodded, pretending to be busy with the dishes so she wouldn't see my face. That's when I knew the story had truly ended, not with punishment, but with understanding. People still comment when they hear what happened. Some say I was brave. Some say I was lucky. Some say they don't know if they could have done the same. I tell them the truth. I didn't feel brave, I say. I felt responsible. There's a difference. Bravery is optional. Responsibility is not. If you're watching this and you're older, and you've started to feel like the world is quietly pushing you aside, listen to me. Your instincts didn't expire with your youth. Your clarity didn't vanish because your hair turned gray. And your role as protector doesn't end just because someone decides you're inconvenient. If you're a parent, understand this: children don't always have the words for danger, but they always have the feeling. When they hesitate, when they freeze, when they go quiet, that's them asking for help without knowing how. And if you're someone who's ever been told, "You're overreacting, you're imagining things, you should just let it go," remember this story. Sometimes letting it go is exactly what predators are counting on. I didn't let it go. I looked closer. And because I did, my granddaughter grew up in a house where safety wasn't assumed, it was practiced. That's the ending they never planned for. And it's the ending I'll protect for as long as I'm here. The last thing I'll say is this. Stories like mine don't end with applause. They end with mornings that feel ordinary again. With cereal bowls in the sink. With backpacks by the door. With a child humming to herself because she isn't afraid in her own home. That's how you know you did the right thing. Not because everyone agrees with you. Not because justice feels dramatic. But because the people you protected get to live without carrying fear they never deserved. I don't think of myself as a hero. I think of myself as someone who paid attention when it mattered. Someone who refused to confuse politeness with trust, or family with safety. Someone who understood that love sometimes means standing alone for a while. Lily doesn't talk about the teddy bear anymore. She doesn't need to. The lesson stayed even after the fear faded. She knows now that her voice matters. That adults can be wrong. That silence is not the same as peace. And I know something too. I know that evil doesn't always lose because it's exposed. Sometimes it loses because it's noticed early. That moment, the freeze, the question, the quiet discomfort, that's where everything turns. That's where futures are decided. If you remember anything from this story, remember that. Pay attention when something feels off. Trust the pause. Protect the child. Document the truth. And never let anyone convince you that going too far to protect the innocent is a mistake. I didn't go too far. I went exactly far enough. And because of that, my granddaughter is safe, not just today, but for the rest of her life. That's the ending. That's the point. And that's a story I'll carry with me, quietly, for as long as I'm here.